City Historic Preservation Commission. It's Monday, February 10th, 2025. The time is 6:34 p.m.
Please be advised that in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the notice of the time, date, and place of this regularly scheduled meeting of the Jersey City Historic Preservation has been sent to the Bergen Record and El Especialito on Thursday, February 6th, 2025. The same notice has been sent to the city clerk for posting on the bulletin board outside the clerk's office in City Hall and on the Jersey City website. I have proof of this notice here in evidence, if we can mark this as B1. And we will move on to a roll call attendance. Commissioner Amatuzzo.
Present.
Commissioner Garriga is absent. Commissioner Sandkamp.
Here.
Commissioner Gunther.
Here.
Commissioner Sakong is absent. Commissioner Blazak is absent. Commissioner Cronin.
Here.
Vice Chair Gucciardo is absent. And Chair Gordon.
Present.
We have 5 members of the commission present this evening. 5 affirmative votes are required for a certificate of appropriateness. Next up on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes from the past few months. So we have first the December 16th, 2024 minutes. Are there any questions or corrections to these minutes? Since there are no corrections or changes, staff recommends making a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Motion. Second.
So we have a motion. Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Amatuzzo.
Aye.
Commissioner Garriga is absent. Commissioner Sandkamp.
Aye.
Commissioner Gunther.
Aye.
Commissioner Sakong is absent. Commissioner Blazak is absent. Commissioner Cronin.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gucciardo is absent. Chair Gordon.
Aye.
We have 5 in favor, no against, no abstentions. The meeting minutes from December 16th pass. Same thing, we also have meeting minutes from January 13th, 2025. Any corrections or changes? Since there are no corrections or changes, staff recommends making a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Motion. Second. I'm the second. I'll be the motion. Sandkamp.
Motion first last time.
I'll second.
So we have Sandkamp and Cronin. Commissioner Amatuzzo.
Aye.
Commissioner Garriga is absent. Commissioner Sandkamp.
Aye.
Commissioner Gunther.
Aye.
Commissioner Sakong is absent. Commissioner Blazak is absent. Commissioner Cronin.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gucciardo is absent. And Chair Gordon.
Aye.
We have 5 in favor, 0 against, 0 abstentions. The minutes from January 13th are approved. For correspondence, all correspondence and all application materials are linked to the application numbers on the agenda. Next up, we have staff. We have announcements. Staff has no announcements at this time. Okay, moving on. If there are any members of the public who would like to speak regarding matters of historic preservation that are not listed on tonight's agenda, please approach the public comment mic. Again, this is for matters that are not on tonight's agenda. Staff sees no members of the public wishing to speak and recommends a motion to open and close public comment.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Robert, I feel like the...
All right, so we'll move.
We don't usually swear it. It's okay. We don't have licenses, so we don't have to swear ourselves in. All good.
No problem. Moving to old business, I'll first call case H-23-0023. The applicant is Benjamin Wine, Esquire, on behalf of Jersey City 3 Deals LLC, owner. The address is 2624 John F. Kennedy Boulevard. This is in the West Bergen, East Lincoln Park Historic District. The application is for a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new 4-story 6-unit residential building and associated site work. This is a recommendation to the Jersey City Zoning Board of Adjustment and was previously carried from the January 10th, 2025 regular HBC meeting.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. For the record, Benjamin Wine of Prime Tuvel and Maselli on behalf of the applicant. As the Chair just indicated, and as we have been before you for 2 separate meetings at this point, the property in question is located at Block 14906, Lot 20, and that's 2624 JFK Boulevard. We've been through the proposal several times already before this board. What started as a 7-unit project initially with city planning became a 6-unit project. That's the application that was ultimately filed. And through the genesis of meeting with the public as well as city planning and Ms. O'Neill, the project before you this evening, which again is no different than what you've seen the last 2 opportunities before you, is for a 4-unit project that would be 4 stories with the idea of matching the general height scheme along that frontage. I'm not going to belabor the point. I know I've been through my opening quite a number of times, but ultimately what I'd like to present to you this evening is our project architect to walk through the revisions that we've made based on the comments that we received last month from this commission. We believe and we hope that you'll agree that the comments have been incorporated to your satisfaction. Some of them a little bit more drastic than others, as you'll see some color changes, some material changes, which were, I would call them more drastic, and then a couple of, perhaps more mundane or routine comments to be addressed within the scope this evening. After that, I would have our professional planner come up and speak generally to the planning scheme of the neighborhood as well as her involvement with the project. There are variances. Obviously, that is something more for the zoning board to take a look at as we proceed to that next step should the commission vote affirmatively in favor of our application. But nevertheless, I would like for her to give a bit of an overview to the commission as to her findings and general planning principles associated with the application. So, Chair, Commissioners, unless you have any questions of me, I'm happy to proceed with Mr. Moreno. Okay.
Of course. Is it this cable?
Yeah, generally. We kind of find out every time which cable it is. They change them on us, but hopefully. You can just keep clicking it. You don't have to click it.
Okay, oh, I'm sorry.
They should be coming up.
Okay.
Oh, those two, yeah.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. State and spell your name for the record.
Martin Moreno, Martin Moreno. I am the project manager here speaking on behalf of T. Laporta Architect PC.
You have a, what?
T. Laporta Architect PC, the firm.
All right, so Martin, before you get into it, I'm going to ask you to focus on the revisions that you've made based on the comments received from the commission over the last 2 meetings, and also to identify, I know, you're going to present a rendering, which I believe is on the screen. If you can confirm for the record that everything about this plan set, with the exception of the rendering, was previously submitted, and that the rendering is simply an exhibit that was finalized over the weekend and ready to present to the commission this evening.
Well, not over the weekend, but since the last meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So am I clear to move forward?
Yes, go
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to see everyone once again. My name is Martin Moreno, as previously stated. So I'm here to speak about the revisions that were done to our project at 22.
You're going to have to slow down,
I'm so sorry.
all right? I'm here to speak about,
I'm here to speak about the revisions made to our project at 2624 John F. Kennedy Boulevard. Most of the changes that were done were to the exterior of the building, including materials, colors, and some landscaping, based off of the comments that were received at last month's meeting. So one of the comments that was very much stretched from both the December and the January meeting was the use of red brick. I believe it was Commissioner Bryan who brought that up. We found that in regards to the context of the neighboring buildings, that the red brick didn't work As you recall, we were trying to push more of like a beige, sort of like a light brown brick. But we decided to explore the possibility of a red brick, and by doing so, we landed on using a green color for the siding, because obviously green is a complementary color to red. And that's something that we felt worked well with the building, so we decided to move forward with it. So the first big changes that I will touch up on are the color changes from both the brown to the red brick, as you see in the lower portion of the building, following my cursor, and the green siding that was applied to the top floors of the building. If you recall, we originally had proposed blue and white siding for the sort of bump out area, the principal bump out area that you see here. That was originally blue siding, with the recessed part of the building being proposed as white siding. After we had spoken, I think it was, apologies, I can't remember his name, the Commissioner Nakong, I believe it was?
Sakong, yeah.
Sakong, I'm sorry. He had spoken about the use of paneling and how to better improve the color the differentiation of the colors in the facade. We decided to take that to heart and apply a more sort of like a white paneling system to the bump outs on the left and on the right, because it is something that is found on neighboring buildings. So if I were to just quickly zoom in, as you can see on our neighboring building directly next to us, their bump outs on both buildings are a full white cladding. It really helps differentiate from the overall sort of grayish, bluish siding of the rest of the principal building, as well as these sort of like larger white trimmings. Also helps the windows and different shapes differentiate from the primary color of the building. We decided to incorporate that into our project, as mentioned, and do both bump outs on the right and on the left with a similar sort of white paneling system, and added larger trimmings around the windows to once again help those stand out. We had also previously proposed sandstone for the color of the windows. We decided to just make it white all around, because the sandstone didn't really mesh well with the larger white trimming. In addition to that, once again, I believe it was Commissioner Bryan who spoke about possibly lowering the hardy panel down a little bit more, just to sort of help eliminate some of that use of brick, so it's not very brick heavy at the lower part of the building. So we took that to heart once again, and we did incorporate that here, and we felt that it worked well. It does really help eliminate the heavy brick accent on the recessed part of the facade. And we also added some vegetation, as previously discussed, to once again help limit the brick from both the bottom and the top. I believe it was Commissioner Amatuzo who went on about replacing the columns in the front with a sort of stronger brick accent. So we went ahead and we did that. It's something that is found on the building 3 doors down. As I move on to the next elevation sheet, I'll highlight that. But that's kind of just pretty much the sort of quick recap of the changes that were made to the exterior. As mentioned, we didn't really make much changes to the interior layouts of the building. So I'll go ahead and move forward to the elevation sheets. There was multiple comments about being the eligibility of the drawings, of how they were sometimes a little hard to read, given that they were quote-unquote 2D black and white drawings. So we decided to incorporate some of the coloring and also just add a little bit of shading to really help differentiate the different surfaces of the building. Here is a little bit more clear in regards to the columns that I had just mentioned. As you recall, we originally had these sort of white posts that were holding up the extrusion of the building. We decided to change that and replace that with a much larger brick base. It's about 16 inches by 16 inches, and it's something that we pulled from the neighboring house 2 doors down. As you see, they also have a very similar feature. Let me zoom in. They have a similar feature with a sort of like, it's not necessarily an arch per se, but it's a sort of like large brick lintel with a larger lintel, L-I-N-T-L, I'm sorry, with a larger brick post on the side. So we decided to incorporate that similar accent to our building to help in place of those white posts that we originally had. Excuse me. Moving on to the side elevations, as I mentioned, you can see here how we originally had the brick going up towards the first floor. Once again, we've lowered that and added more siding and reduced the use of brick to help eliminate that strong brick accent at the bottom. And once again, just brought that sort of red accent all the way across instead of the previous brown brick that we had, as mentioned, to match the neighboring brown accents of the buildings. Here you can see it a little bit better, what I was referring to before, of how the bump outs on both of the neighboring buildings have this sort of like strong white accent. It's like a strong white cladding / paneling. So this is our immediate neighbor here and the neighbor 2 houses down. Both their bump outs are pretty much a primarily white, white color through the use of different materials. And we decided to incorporate that into both of our front bump outs as well. And moving on to, once again, the streetscape, showing the building in context with neighboring buildings. And we decided to take the rendering of the front part of the building and superimpose it to the existing streetscape, just to once again give it a better idea of how the building, the new design more specifically, works in context with the neighboring buildings. And that's more or less the
Yeah, Martin, just a couple of follow-ups. There was two other changes that I noted. One, regarding, I could be wrong, I think it was Commissioner Gunther who had brought up regarding the style of door and the way the transom worked. If you could speak to that as well.
Yes, I believe it was either Commissioner Gunther or Commissioner Amatuzzo. I'm not sure which one it was, but they recommended possibly doing a transom above the window just to help give it more of a grander entry feel. So we went ahead and we did that, and we also changed the type of door. Thanks for bringing that up, and I forgot to mention that. We also changed the type of door to be a more to be this more sort of 2-panel pane glass style door. Almost, it's a little similar to a barn door type, but we changed it for because we felt it worked better with the new design, as well as it was something that was mentioned in the previous meeting.
And just to clarify, the other door beside it, if you run back to that sheet, that's just to give dimensions. That is not, the one on the right is not the actual proposed door, it's just the construction.
Right, and it's labeled here that it's typical details for this brand of door. So this is something that's found in most spec sheets, regardless of what door you choose. They provide this sort of like typical details for all the doors of that manufacturing company.
Okay, and the last question I wanted to ask you is regarding, we had gone back and forth proposing a CMU wall, removing the CMU wall. Where does that stand based on the commissioner's comments at the last meeting?
I believe that based off the last meeting, we felt it was best to move forward without the CMU wall and do the railing. So as you can see here, we did incorporate it into the streetscape, the proposed streetscape study, to give it a better sense of what it looks like in context. And we also added it to our rendering as well. So going back to the initial rendering, we did add the railing going across the front. This sort of low transparency point that you see back here in the bottom left-hand corner, that's
Repeat that.
the transparency that you see in the bottom left-hand corner. That's meant to show the fence, because we do have a 6-foot white board-on-board fence going all the way around. We originally added the fence to the rendering, but we felt that it was covering up the window, so we just made it a little transparent so that the windows were more eligible.
Okay, and that leads me to my real last question. There was definitely a comment from the commission, part and parcel of lowering the impact, I would say, of that ground level, recognizing we wanted to maintain it in order to have an ADA accessible unit. You need to have it down there. But one of the comments that came out was regarding putting in some additional landscaping in addition to removing the brick, which I see. Can you confirm that we have also shown that as well?
We have done that as well. This rendering, just to get a little technical, is set to the noon sun of the property. So this light here is a little bit more in shadow. So it is a little hard to see the bushes that we have proposed here at the bottom left-hand corner. But if I go back to the colored elevations on sheet A200, we are representing it there. So once again, we added some vegetation and brought the siding down to just help shrink down the lower part of the brick.
Thank you, Martin. Chair and Commission, I have nothing further for this witness at this point.
Do any commissioners have any questions? Want to look at anything on the plans again?
I just have a question about the height here, which I've brought up a couple times. I see that the floor to ceiling heights are 9 feet, and this building is so much taller. We have a site that slopes down, and the buildings gradually also sort of slope down. And this one is just much taller. And I'm wondering if there's a reason that we can't sort of minimize that with the floor to ceiling height being reduced.
I can answer from a legal side. I do believe that Jersey City and perhaps Ms. O'Neill can weigh in some more. The land development ordinance does not want to see floor to ceiling heights of less than 9 feet, is my understanding. So in addition to being just another variance, which I know is something obviously can be granted, I do believe that that falls outside of the general scheme that both land use boards are looking for.
Is that a code requirement that it is a minimum of 9 feet, or is that a preference?
It's a zoning requirement.
It's a zoning requirement.
Correct.
Okay.
I will just note, it is written in supplementary zoning that the recommended floor to ceiling is 9 feet. Applicants have asked for less, but they are correct that the preference is
But it's
general.
recommended. It's not
Yeah,
required.
well, so I don't know the phrasing off the top of my head. Plenty of applicants have come to this board before with floor to ceiling heights of less than 9 and have been approved with that. However, Ben is correct that they do have to go to zoning board after this, and zoning board is absolutely going to turn around and ask why their floor to ceilings aren't 9 feet.
I just think it's too tall, and the base of the building is tall. And I know you've made some moves, but it seems like reducing the ceiling height will help reduce the size of the building. As I've said before, you can see it on this streetscape. Like, it's the prevailing design is a pedimented 3-story building with a basement, and I know that you're putting a unit at the bottom floor, and that's causing it to be a little taller at the base than what you typically see throughout this historic district. I'm just concerned about the height. And the other thing I know we have these elevations, and you have a separate rendering of the building, but what I don't see, which maybe I could feel better, is a rendering of what this will look like in the context, like at eye level.
Well, we have, it's not necessarily a rendering, Commissioner. It's more of a superimposed photo that I previously highlighted. So this was scaled to match the property.
I guess for Commissioner Gunther, that is marked
Right.
scale. That is an accurate depiction.
Okay, yeah, and I think that's a better, that helps to see that.
And that was-
I am still concerned that the base of the building, which is normally a basement floor, is a little tall.
So Commissioner, what I will tell you also, the nuanced difference between basement and cellar, I honestly don't recall if we spoke about it last time.
I'm not calling it a cellar. I'm saying like, it doesn't read as, I understand that you're putting a unit there, so you can't have it be like the basements in this historic district, but I do think it could be closer. And it could be reduced, the height of the stoop from grade.
So that's a question. I mean, Martin, can we reduce that any more below grade and still have it as habitable space?
There's a few things that would, I don't want to say would cause concern, but some things that we would have to be mindful of would be the egress height of the windows. If we were to bring that first floor down, for example, a foot, that's clearly going to shrink the windows down about a foot. So that could cause an egress issue in achieving the proper egress-sized windows. Other than that, to be honest, I don't see much more issue other than that. It's really just more of an egress window issue. But I like I said, I just think it's, given that unit is already 2 feet below ground, I think the more appropriate height for that unit would be the 9 feet, because that's also the ADA unit, which is something that the community was very in support for. So I do believe, as we had mentioned before, that the minimum requirement or preference of the city is a 9-foot floor to ceiling, and we are working with that minimum. I understand your comments, Commissioner. I totally understand where you're coming from, but I just personally wouldn't really lower that lower level.
I think it helps to have this information about the zoning because it seems like 9 feet is not, like a code thing to me. But
Well, to
I
be
do
clear,
agree that a
it's-
lot of the other changes that you've made on this, on the project have moved it in the right direction. I think it helps to see it in the rendering. I think it looks pretty nice and it fits into the context
Thank you.
materially.
Commissioner, just by way of personal anecdote, because I think it is relevant, I have personally brought one application before, I believe it was the planning board, not the zoning board, with a less than 9-foot ceiling height, and the only reason that it even got considered was because it was continuing backwards an existing floor plate, so it was an expansion of what was there. But in my experience, it's to Ms. O'Neill's point, we could ask for a variance. You can ask for a variance from anything in the zoning ordinance, but I do know that it's something that they have specifically written into the code as what they want to see.
So if you were to ask for less than 9 feet, that would require you to apply for a variance? Okay, thanks. That helps, thanks.
Yeah, it's an ordinance issue, not a building code issue, just to be clear, right?
I have a question for you. I like the transition to the red brick. It doesn't feel like the house is floating on a blonde foundation. It feels more grounded. I definitely like the solid all green siding instead of the variation in color. My problem still lies with the columns across the front of the house. The extra tall one on the left versus the two short ones on the porch just seemed too imbalanced. And I was wondering if maybe putting a railing between the two porch columns, like the neighboring house has, would
2 railings
rectify
between, I'm sorry.
would rectify that situation of the column on the left feeling too tall, too big, and the other one's feeling too short.
Are you suggesting a
Yes,
railing here?
there, like the neighboring house to the right has the two columns with a railing in between.
Commissioner, we had that before.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and it was recommended that we change it to this.
Okay, I don't remember that. And my other question is, this house is quite stately. I'm still not sold on the front door. It looks like a Home Depot off-the-shelf front door. And I think that it should, like any entrance to a beautiful home, should make a statement. And this says to me that we found this great door at the Home Depot.
I understand.
And I think it should look more like it's in context to the neighborhood. Maybe one big, beautiful wooden door, with a side light or something else. But that just looks too big box to me.
Understood. But just to sort of plead our case, the manufacturer is MMI, which is not a quote-unquote standard manufacturing door company. I'm not saying that you can't get that at Home Depot or not, but just to argue your point, we went with a specific manufacturer that's not very used for a very common standard home. So we decided to go with this sort of barn door look because we felt that it was a little bit more traditional and it did fit well with the context of the neighboring buildings. But if you are still not satisfied with it, we have no issue trying to see some alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that you went to a company who makes it special, but it doesn't look special.
Understood.
It looks like big box.
Commissioner, is there a particular design that you have
Maybe
in
just
mind?
something with one window instead of a divided side light. Like an old-fashioned door would have one window with maybe some panels going
Right. I understand.
instead
So-
of the grill on the front of the door on the 9-light division.
Right, because this is a 2-panel glass door, as this is the specifications of it right here.
Right.
So rather
Yeah,
than
it's the 9-light thing that makes it look like it's coming off the shelf from the Home Depot.
Got it.
We had a development on Sherman Place, and they used hardy plank siding and did all that, but they used a beautiful custom 3-foot wood door that looked like it belonged in context to the neighborhood. This does not look like that at all.
Sure. I mean, we can also look once again at the neighboring doors, the doors of the neighboring homes. I know 2 doors down has just a solid door. Yeah, as you can see here, let me zoom in real quick. 2 doors down just has a solid door.
Yeah, that's not a historic, I mean, the porch has been closed in, so that's not really a historic door. But maybe the house on the corner would give you a better indication.
The house on the corner is a little similar to the one that we had chosen. I think the one that's the more unique is the one to our immediate neighbor, which has a sort of oval-shaped window. So that's something that we can, once again, see if we can come up with a better alternative for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Amatuzzo. It should be a wood door. It should be or like with a raised panel and maybe the side light. I don't know about the transom, but that maybe. But it's materially not appropriate for like a door, an entrance door. And it's a little bit also the style. So just, look at other homes that are similar in the district that might still have their historic doors as a guide.
I think there is one a little bit more down that has it has slimmer side light windows on both sides. And I think something like that, when you're talking about it, I think something like that would probably be a better fit here. So we'll take another look at what's.
I think it just because of the style of the house and the neighborhood, I just think it needs to be a little bit fancier looking.
Understood.
And more like a home door than a door to I don't know. It just doesn't fit. So a change there would be great. Thank you.
So I agree with the comments of Commissioners Gunther and Amatuzzo. My first impression upon seeing this revised design is that it is definitely a big improvement. I'm pleased to see a lot of these changes. The thing that struck me, however, was the use of the white cladding, which you had said is bold, strong, based on some of the neighboring properties. I do see that in the photos you shared. But there's those 2 sections of the building, just to the left of the main entrance, most prominently, and then on the extreme left of the front facade. That is a lot of white cladding, just broad expanses of it. I wonder if you might have gone a little too far with the white cladding. To me, it seems a little odd, and I might prefer to see that pared down a bit, but I would also be curious to hear what the other commissioners think. To me, it seems odd.
Well, we
I would
did.
agree.
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I would agree with
Yeah, I would just say that
Commissioner Gordon.
one of the alternatives that we tried was to do more of a solid green all the way around, including the bump outs, and then once again utilizing a larger window trim to kind of help differentiate the 2 colors. So that was the original sort of design that we went with. Once we did the alternative with the white cladding, we felt that worked a little bit better. But that's definitely something that we can revisit and see if come up with maybe an alternative so it's not so prominent in the front facade.
One more question regarding that white cladding. Is it just flat cladding or is it like a shingle
No, we're proposing fiber cement panels.
fiber cement panel? So it is just flat and has no
I mean,
decoration of it,
there's a
no
sample that we
embellishment.
added.
Sorry, you're talking over one another, you have to wait until he finishes. So it's just, what was that?
It's just a white panel with no embellishments or shingle or any kind of style. It's just flat and white, which I think adds to its largeness.
Right, so this is a sample that we provided here. It's a smooth white fiber cement panel.
Okay.
The neighbors had more of like a vinyl plastic looking type of panel. We're proposing something a little bit different, but we understand the comment and something we can revisit.
Maybe a wider window would help.
I'm sorry, Commissioner?
Maybe a larger window, wider, would help that situation. I don't know.
For which
Oh,
bump
that
out?
white, the bulk white that we're just talking about.
Sure.
Where you have a single window, maybe a wider window would help lessen the white cladding.
Yeah, I mean, I have some ideas of how we can
Okay.
improve upon it, so I'll definitely I'll take those comments to mind and see what we can do.
Yeah, I don't think it needs a dramatic overhaul. I feel like with some tweaking, you could be in a good place.
Any
Even,
other?
I was just building on what Paul and Robert were saying about this area of the building. If it were, like you've used some of the shingles or scallops textures in the other parts of the building, that might be enough to break up the sort of intensity of this sort of white part of the building, and maybe it would just have more shadow and more texture, and maybe that would be enough.
Right. Kind of going back to what I was saying before, we had originally, like I said, had a more, the whole building was originally green, and the use of the trims helped it have some color differentiation. We originally had the left side as just green and only one strip as a white panel. That was something that looked good. Ultimately, we decided on this, but like I said, there are some alternatives that I think can satisfy your comments in regards to the use of the white panel.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, feedback?
Okay, so the question I guess I would have for the commission, these changes, I mean, I wrote them down. I think the chairman, I think you said they're relatively minor tweaks. Would you prefer that we return to show you these tweaks, or would you prefer that we work with staff?
I tend to think that these are significant enough that you would have to come back, but what do you think?
That's your determination. It's up to the commission to defer to staff.
I think with multiple significant design changes, I think you would have to come back, but hopefully it would be a relatively short presentation and you don't have to give a fourth introduction to the project.
Okay, no problem. So then if it's okay with you, what I'd like to do, since I have our planner here, if she can speak to the commission this time so that she's great, but I can avoid paying her to come back next time again, if that's all right.
Sure.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state and spell your full name.
It's Carolyn Worstel.
For the record.
Yep, Carolyn Worstel. Carolyn Worstel, Worstel.
Carolyn, if you could please give the commission the benefit of your your educational and professional background and the status of your license in the state of New Jersey.
Sure. I'm a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey. I have a master's degree in city and regional planning from Rutgers University. I've appeared before the Jersey City Planning and Zoning Board numerous times, and I just don't believe I've yet had the chance to speak before this board.
Chair, I would submit Ms. Worstel as an expert in the field of professional planning.
The chair recognizes Ms. Worstel as a licensed planner.
Thank you. So, Carolyn, just recognizing that we are going to be returning with those modifications discussed on the record this evening, to the extent that you can still give your general planning opinion as well as the context of the neighborhood and the project as a whole, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So I've been involved with this project since its very inception, really working with the team to deal with what is, from a planning perspective, a little bit of an odd lot. Everything about the Jersey City zoning ordinance is designed for narrow, deep lots. So when we're sometimes presented with a project on a lot like this, we sort of have to say, how do we work with a lot, knowing that no matter what we're going to do, we have to go for variances? Because the lot just doesn't conform in any way, shape, or form to what is typical and what the ordinance was written for. So we worked really hard with this. This lot itself is very much oriented more side to side, so it's a much wider lot. And so we worked really hard with the team to design a building that really focused on how does this building present itself and deal with the context along Kennedy Boulevard? On this particular block, Kennedy Boulevard hits these lots and creates a diagonal. And when you look at the context, all of the homes that are to the is north of it, each one steps forward a little bit. And so it creates sort of a pattern along this block where each building is sort of stepped back, but there's this stepping. And so that was something that when we were designing and looking at this building is we wanted to continue that design style, creating a building that continued that step back pattern along the block. So that was sort of one of the things that we really looked at with this design. We also looked at the fact that we're in an area where our maximum building height is 35 feet. But the buildings that are here and the context we're in was designed and built at a time when there was no ordinance. And so we really tried to look at it and say, we want to try and create a building that is consistent and creates a consistent window pattern, and then creates a roof line that is somewhat similar, that focuses on the peaks. So that was sort of how we were sort of looking at the context. We were trying to say, how do we create a building that is consistent with the character of that block, but also, again, acknowledging the fact that we're in a very different design period, that there are certain code and building standards that are different than when these other buildings were created. And so that's sort of where we sort of started off with in looking at this building and design. And then we really tried to meet a lot of those standards that are there. And in the Jersey City ordinance, there's standards for new construction. Oops, sorry, what did I do? And it really looks at saying, we're not trying to replicate the building that was there. We are not trying to essentially totally recreate the buildings that are next to us, but we're trying to take a lot of that and take the character and create something that seems appropriate along that block. And so the standards there are talking about things like site and setting, the building height. Again, we were trying to create a building height that seemed appropriate while still creating spaces that met the new sort of standards and codes of today's construction. We were trying to create that visual compatibility by making sure that the window patterns were very similar, that they generally lined up with the block. And again, the block, it all steps up. So it's not perfectly even across the block as you may see in your more traditional row homes or townhomes. But again, trying to make sure that the floors to floors generally lined up so that it didn't look completely out of context. We looked at things like the relationships of the unbroken planes to voids. So again, talking about how do windows and doors, align along the frontage. Looking at the relationship of vacant land to buildings and structures. So what is the spacing between them? And this is something that Martin had mentioned in previous testimony, was making sure that we were creating spaces in between our buildings that were consistent. So here, again, we were trying to make sure that between our building and the buildings next to us, we're creating something of a consistent pattern. So that was something that we were really looking at. That relationship of exterior projections to the street, so making sure that our buildings step back consistent with the character of how the other buildings are sort of stepping back. Using those exterior, the building materials, focusing on using the...
I'm just going to go to the space and leave it referring to.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Trying to use materials, trying to utilize the siding to create those textures and patterns that are very characteristic of, the design of the buildings that are nearby. the roof forms, focusing on making sure that we were creating a roof form that was consistent with a very strong peak, with a strong pediment. You know, those are all very characteristic of the three other buildings on this block. You know, and then just again looking at generally the scale. And again, none of these buildings are exactly all the same. They're all a little different. And so you're not trying to match up and say, we need that our roof line to exactly match the building next to us, because that's not the character of this block. It's not, you know, row of townhomes that are exactly the same. We're all built at the same time. And really this is very characteristic. You know, I was reading while we were doing this, I was really looking at that West Bergen East Lincoln Park guidelines. And within those guidelines, when it really talks about the character of the whole district, on page 8, it really talks about that the West Bergen East Lincoln Park Historic District has a distinctive character founded on the diversity of its architecture. And that, you know, this was sort of a hallmark of the time and period in which this area was developed, and that they had this aesthetic appeal that took delight in, I think the term was constant variety. So the idea is that these homes don't have to look exactly the same, because the idea was that they're all a little bit different. You know, and so I think that was sort of where we were going, is trying to make sure that we had a building that looked like it wasn't out of context, but wasn't exactly the same as what was around us. And so I really think that that's what we've achieved here. Even when we were just discussing the colors, we were talking about the blues and the tans, and it felt a little bit almost too much similar to what was there, which is when we went with the green and the blue. It seems to be consistent with the character, but to create that distinctive approach for this specific building. So I think that, you know, overall we were really trying to meet those guidelines and create a building that was both distinctive, but also appropriate in the context of where it is.
Thank you. And Carolyn, did you have a chance to read through Ms. O'Neill's report as well? I think the most recent version I sent to you today.
Oh, I missed that one, I think.
It was relatively similar to the
Okay.
last one.
I think I only updated that you guys submitted new drawings.
Okay. Yes, I have reviewed Ms. O'Neill's report. I guess the most recent I reviewed was December 16th.
Okay, and then there was a recommendation in that version about removing the wall, which we've done. Do you feel that there's anything within that report that conflicts with your opinion as a professional planner?
No, I don't. I think, you know, this talk about, and the staff recommendations talking about that it's mostly consistent. And that, again, this is a new building. You know, it's not a recreation. It's not restoration. So, you know, it is trying to really meet those standards for new construction. And I believe that we have met them.
Okay, and that was actually alluding to my last question to you. Regarding the general standards for new construction, the fact that obviously you have to work within building code relevant in 2025 and beyond when you are constructing a new structure, even in a historic district. Do you feel, especially in line with some of the comments about, you know, floor to ceiling heights, as well as, you know, ADA compliance, obviously, which probably did not exist when these other structures were constructed?
Not even close.
Right. So do you believe, would it be your opinion as a professional planner, that the project like this, again, understanding that we will be back with a couple of additional tweaks as discussed this evening, generally supports, I guess, that dichotomy of marrying the old to the new?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. So, Chair, that would conclude my direct examination of Ms. Worsthal.
Thank you.
Do any commissioners have any questions? Great. All right, so we know we're going to be carrying this case so that they can make those architectural adjustments. We have given them, we've written down a bunch of feedback. Charlene, I know you're here for this application. Do we want to open public comment?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if anyone wants to make a motion to open public comment.
I'll make a motion to open public comment.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. If you are a member of the public and you'd like to speak regarding this application, you can approach the public comment mic. And just as a reminder for all public comment, any questions do need to be directed to the chair, who will take all the questions, we'll write them down, and then we will answer them once we close public comment.
Could I ask, does that mean there will be no public comment next time?
The applicant will be submitting new materials, so we have to open public comment again.
I see. Okay.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And then Ms. Burke for the record. Sorry.
Charlene, Charlene Burke. Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. And thank you, Ben Wine. He has been very cooperative with his team in meeting with the community. We've met twice, and there were certainly aspects of this project that were changed, that were based on comment from the community, and particularly on the unit count. But let me read what I have to, because I want to get it all in my 3 minutes. There have been 2 meetings with Mr. Wine and his team with the community, with a few of our concerns addressed, such as the reduction of the units within, which might be sold as condos, which is one of the things we were hoping, rather than rentals. There remains a number of items that concern us, the neighborhood. On other items that we had opinions, listening to all of the discussions here has been enlightening, and the modifications suggested have been seen by me, at least, as improvements. This is a key visual entry and exit to the northern boundary of the West Bergen Historic District. Amassing contributing and key contributing structures from Montgomery to Duncan Avenue, except for one building. So all of them are key or certainly contributing. Those just 2 houses, key, just to the right of this project area. Those are the only contributing. Everything else surrounding this is key contributing, except for one non-apartment building across the street. So it's northbound going along this. When you go northbound, this project is squarely in your view because of the reverse S that the boulevard takes at this point. Now, all these buildings that were here were described as, in our nomination, as circa 1900 late Victorian style homes, typically representing the architecture that was along the boulevard before apartment buildings became predominant, starting in the 1910s. So here's a few of the things that we need to address as a community. We still think that the density should be reduced by 1 more unit because it would reduce the rooftop bulk, which we think is way too large for this building. It's just massive compared to the buildings just to the south. So that still gives a 50% increase to the permitted density. That gives 3 units within this building. All properties to the south are currently only 1 family. Allowing a masonry wall in front would continue to contribute to the continuity of the front yards of the homes to the south. We were in support of that, a low wall, just to create continuity with all those others. Because the property near Montgomery, that has a wall and a setback and a much larger space that creates a gap between these houses and the Montgomery Street project. And then lastly, increase the roof overhang, the eaves on the porch, and no down leader from the rain should be attached to the column. That is so tacky, and I see that on the plans. Why should the leader be on the column? It should be back on the building. Put the drains in the back, and it should be on the building, to the main house. Those are the three things. Otherwise, I like the color changes, the things that were suggested here, the masonry on the bottom, bringing
30
down.
seconds. 30 seconds.
Thank you. All those are positive changes, and the door in particular, you have lots of original doors in the neighborhood. I thank you for that. That really is the entry, the smile that the house makes to the public. If you're not going to pay attention to these little details, and I say that about the eaves, because that little overhang would make a difference on that porch entry. It's a little thing, but that little detail impacts the area so much. And look at the next buildings over. All of them have nice eaves on them. So, thank you.
Thanks, Charlene. Are there any other members of the public present who would like to speak regarding this application? All right, staff sees no members of the public present who would also like to speak, so I recommend a motion to close public comment.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I have the notes written down from there for the additional suggestions to the building. So when I send the previous ones that the commission discussed, I will include those in that email.
Sure, thank you. And Commission, I know you have a busy agenda this evening, and I don't want to take more of your time. I do just want to ask one question, and I appreciate Ms. Burke's comments as well. She has been a pleasure to work with. It's always great when you have a good neighborhood association, historic or non, that's willing to at least get you to 95, 98% of where you'd like to be. My one question, and I asked this out of pure deference, obviously this wall has been a topic of conversation, and I just want to be clear for the record, my client has no issue either with the CMU wall or without the CMU wall and going with the railing option that we proposed. But hearing that there is a little bit of I guess, disagreement between the commission and the public, I just want to make sure that the commission's direction to us is not to have that wall. That's really my question.
So just to clarify, the staff recommendation was that there was no wall there historically. If they need the wall for engineering related purposes, right? Structure related purposes, which is the whole point of a retaining wall, no problem with it. But to my knowledge, they don't. So we just said we don't necessarily see the need for it, especially because there is a front areaway fence. So I think Mr. Wine's just looking for feedback from you guys on if you guys care if there's a wall there or not.
So I have a question. If you put the wall up, will the fence disappear?
I think as we had testified last time, there would be a railing on top of the wall, most likely, because the gate entry component would be taller than whatever that 2.5 foot wall would look like.
I feel like a lot of the walls in this streetscape are retaining walls, like the yards are raised.
Correct.
So they make sense. And if it's a difference between a metal fence and what effectively is just a brick fence, the metal fence makes more sense.
Yeah, to my knowledge, they're all retaining walls for a raised front yard that have been added within the past 10 years.
So then I would go back and say that I'd be happy without the wall if it's doesn't have a purpose other than to match the neighbors.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So that being said, if there are no other comments on this,
Well, did the applicant, before we put this off till the next meeting, did the applicant want to just respond briefly to the other two comments raised by Ms. Burke? So just so we can make sure you don't have to come back a fifth time.
Sure. So I have,
Yeah. So the elephant in the room was the comment about density, which I think probably also goes to Commissioner Gunther's comments about the size and massing of the building. If you were to reduce the number of units, that might, kill two birds with one stone. But is that something that the applicant is willing to entertain?
So look, one of the things, and I recognize that this commission did not have the benefit of being part of those neighborhood conversations and at this point, what is probably close to 2 years of design. When this project started, one of the things that, and I know it's not a land use consideration, but it is in a sense of this has been a vacant lot, and to develop this lot has to make sense, dollars and cents, to a developer in order to construct anything on the lot to make it worthwhile. While that's not a typical land use concern, where it does get involved, and it does talk about it a little bit in case law, is if it's to the point that you're going to have a blighted site that's just going to remain vacant because it doesn't work, then that is something that should be considered. So one of the things, and again, I recognize that this commission didn't have the opportunity to be part of those conversations. When we started with 7 units, or really 6 units, I say 7, but it was 6 by the time it even got to the community. 7 was worked out with a very substandard sized unit with city planning, who did not recommend that. One of the things that they really focused on the community was, well, we would like to see these as condominium units. So we were able to say, look, developers, as you may know, do not typically make that decision until after a building is constructed. You can design a building, but recognizing that you're at least 1.5 years, if not more, away from making that final determination, obtaining your certificate of occupancy, and being ready to make those units available to the public. My client really said, well, I would prefer not to even make that consideration now. And my recommendation to him was, I think you should design or redesign these units so that they are conducive more so to condominium purchase rather than rental. One of those things, and again, this commission did not have the opportunity to see this at this point, but one of those things included putting washer dryer units in every single one of the units, unlike a rental building where what we had previously was 1 room on the lower level, smaller units. We had 6 units so that you did not need to take up space with amenities like that because you could put it in 1 small room in the basement. We made that change. And if these are still rentals, that's a really nice amenity, but that is something that's constructed in a way that is typically more conducive to condominium purchase. So I know this is a very long-winded way of answering your question. Under the R1 zoning requirements, what would be permitted on this lot is 2 units in a principal building and 1 additional accessory dwelling unit, so a 3rd unit. So 3 units are permitted as of right on this lot. What the zoning board is going to hear from our professional planner, who you heard a little bit from tonight, is that this lot is not going to work with an accessory dwelling unit. I don't think it would be historically appropriate in the slightest to have any type of accessory dwelling unit in the rear, despite the fact that the R1 zone allows for and arguably encourages that. I can tell you with all honesty, most of my R1 applications now include that feature because it's a bonus unit available to developers at a very low cost to construct. That would not make appropriate sense here. So one of the considerations that, and I know it's less for this board and more for the zoning board, but one of the considerations really is that, yes, we're asking for 1 additional unit of density for this property to make it make sense, but in order to spend the time, spend the money, and spend the effort on constructing a good project here that makes sense to actually develop, this is one of the considerations that we're going to put into play. So I know that was a very long answer, Chairman, but I would appreciate if the commission appreciates and understands.
Okay, that's helpful context. Thank you. And then, of course, the final comment was regarding the overhang or eaves and the down leader being attached to the column. Rather, it should be on the building. Do you have any?
That I will certainly ask the architect to look at. I objectively don't have a problem with that. We'll take a look at that if that can be accommodated. It's the first time we heard that comment, but we'll take a look at that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. All right, so the next HPC meeting is March 10th. I assume you'd like to be carried to March 10th?
Let me double check that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I will make March 10th work.
Great. All right, that being said, if anyone wants to make a motion to carry this application to March 10th.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right. Now moving to new business. I will call case H-24-0406. The applicant is Kristen Hopkins Clegg, AIA. Applicant on behalf of Vanessa Eng and Gil Perez, owners. The address is 252 4th Street in the Harsimus Cove Historic District. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness for interior renovations, front facade restoration, and a proposed rear addition at 252 4th Street, an altered, contributing Italianate-influenced Greek Revival row house built circa 1860 in the Harsimus Cove Historic District.
If you'd raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And state and spell your full name, you're going to have to keep your voice up.
Hold on 1 second. I'm Kristen Hopkins Clegg. It's Kristin. Hopkins, Hopkins, and then a hyphen. Clegg, Clegg. All right.
Staff notes for the record that Kristen has previously been qualified in front of this board as an expert in the field of architecture.
Okay, so I'm here for 252 4th Street. The only work that's being done is really the owner's duplex, which is on the garden level, and the first floor, which I call parlor level most times.
Which I call what level?
Parlor level. The only work that's being done to the top 2 floors is window replacement on the front facade. All the front facade windows will be Marvin Wood Ultimates per historic requirements, or to meet historic requirements. And in the front elevation, we are also lowering the front windows at that parlor level. We are not changing out the front door. So what we're really here for is that back addition. Currently, I'll go back to what's existing. Currently, there's a little bit of a hodgepodge of additions that have been done prior to the homeowners that are my clients. So we are actually going to demolish the existing addition that is there and add a larger addition to the back. I'm going to actually show you that in 3D to make it a little easier. So you can see the back elevation of the existing facade. A lot of the existing facade of the bottom 2 floors where we're doing the work has already been demolished and removed over time. So this addition is to include a 1-bedroom and the kitchen, along with a deck and a privacy screen, because the deck is on the property line on the east side of the property, so it's a zoning requirement now. And there is a deck, a 5-foot deck off the back of the kitchen, and we will be using the Hardy Plank Smooth. I have samples if you'd like to see. It's going to be in the night gray here that you can see. If anyone wants to see it, I can bring it to you. And then we are painting the cornice, and also, like, on the front facade, besides the windows, cleaning the sills. They've been painted. So that is the majority of the work that we're doing. I can answer any questions if you have.
Any questions?
The addition's not visible from the public right of way at all.
Public right of way, yeah.
I'm just looking at the egress. Do you require a secondary egress now? How many units is it?
It's 3 units. The building department is allowing a 40-foot rear yard setback for egress.
Okay. I'm just trying to see where did you achieve that egress from the top of the second floor addition? I'm not seeing it. Is it a drop down ladder?
Yeah, there's a drop down ladder here. Okay. So from the top 2 floors, you come down here and then come down onto the deck and then out.
And you got approval for a drop down there?
Well,
new.
I have to I have to go to the building department after this.
Okay.
So we'll find out there. We had a drop-down ladder before, so
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we're hoping. So.
That's my only questions. Thanks.
Okay, if we have no other questions, does that conclude your testimony? Great. If there are no more questions, testimony is concluded. We will move on to public comment. If there are any members of the public who would like to address the commission regarding this application, please approach the public comment mic. Staff sees no members of the public present and recommends a motion to open and close public comment.
Motion.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move into staff comments. This application is pretty straightforward. Staff finds it to be consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic preservation. The front facade restoration work is appropriate and consistent with the downtown historic district guidelines. The enlargement of the first floor windows is consistent with site evidence for the building, as evidenced by the infill brick below the windows, and it also is consistent with other buildings within the row. As we noted, the addition will not be visible from the public right-of-way and is similar to other additions on the block. There's one that's larger, and then that are a few that are smaller, but it fits in with the existing block paradigm and development patterns of the area. So in HPC staff's opinion, the project as proposed will not cause an adverse effect on the character and or integrity of the historic resources or the Harsmith Cove Historic District. As such, HPC staff recommends approval of a certificate of appropriateness with the standard conditions as noted in the staff report.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we will do a roll call vote. Commissioner Amatuzzo?
Aye.
Commissioner Guria is absent. Commissioner Sankamp?
Aye.
Commissioner Gunther?
Aye.
Commissioner Sakong is absent. Commissioner Blazak is absent. Commissioner Cronin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gucciardo is absent. Chair Gordon?
Aye.
Okay, we have 5 yeas, 0 nays, 0 abstentions. The certificate of appropriateness with conditions is approved.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. All right, before I call the next case, it's a little early, but I think maybe this is a good stopping point for a 5-minute recess. So we'll take a 5-minute break and come back at 7:51. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. It's 7:55, and I will now call case H24-0163. The applicant is Stephen Joseph Esquire on behalf of SASM Morris Company, LLC owner. The address is 83 Morris Street in the Paulus Hook Historic District. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new 13 residential unit and 2 commercial unit mixed-use building and associated site work and the interior renovation, facade repair, and window replacement of the existing building, an altered contributing Greek Revival building built circa 1860 in the Paulus Hook Historic District. This is a recommendation to the Jersey City Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Good evening, Stephen Joseph, Castano Quigley-Trami for the applicant. Yeah, it was a mouthful, the description of the project. There's a lot going on here. It's a little unique because it's mostly new construction, but there's this existing building here that we're incorporating into the new design. And I think our team did a pretty good job of that. This is a referral to the zoning board, so I feel like I should mention that a little bit here. We need preliminary and final major site plan approval, but we also have variances for use, height, rear yard setback, building coverage, parking, number of signs per facade, terrace setback, and number of trees. Sounds like a lot of stuff. It makes sense in context. Some of it's due to it being a mix between the old and the new. The other part of it is the historic ordinance doesn't really talk about mixed-use buildings. It talks about townhouses. This commission has seen applications with those variances before. The other part of it is the floodplain. It's also my understanding this commission has seen an application in the past for this site. It was different, larger in scope and density, but the site may look familiar. So let's bring up the architect. We'll take a walk through the plans and we'll see how we feel. Nelson, let's get you sworn in.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And your full name, please?
Nelson Benavides. Nelson Benavides.
And Nelson, I believe you appeared before this commission last meeting, and you
I
were
have.
sworn and testified. I would ask the commission continue to accept his qualification.
Yes, so accepted.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Good evening. I wanted to introduce 8389 Morris Street. The project is 13 residential units with 2 or 3 ground floor commercial spaces, which would be including restaurant use. Sorry, this is moving all over the place. The current lot is consists of an existing 3-story building, which contains a ground floor restaurant and 2 residential units. And then on the existing building extends almost all the way to the rear yard lot line. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me. Extends to the rear, what I'm calling a rear yard line, but it would appear to be, it's currently zoned based on the zoning description as a side yard. Then there's also an empty lot, which is the long 25 by 100 foot lot. We're looking for variances for building coverage and height, as described by Stephen Joseph, among some of the other variances. So the proposed building is a 4-story building, which would contain 13 units. The new building, which surrounds the existing building, would contain 12 units, and the existing building would contain 1 residential unit. The ground floor restaurant would remain, and the new building would contain the building lobby for the residential unit and the commercial space for an additional restaurant, which is an expansion of an existing use. The following drawing shows the existing block diagram and showing the existing building here and the empty lot that's on the corner and on the side. The proposed building completes the corner, encompassing the existing building. The building would be 4 stories in height, and leaving the existing 3-story building in place. And the side drawings are showing the existing block elevation with the existing building in place, and then the proposed bulk elevation, which shows the 4-story building. This would be the Washington Street elevation, and on Morris Street, the existing Morris Street elevation is here with a larger, 6-7-story building on the corner, and the existing standalone townhouse, 3-story townhouse here. And the proposed building would be basically the 4-story building, 4-story building surrounding the existing 3-story building. There is currently an empty lot adjacent to it, which is not part of this project. It's under different ownership. These are currently the sightline drawings from the public right-of-way from the streets. Sorry, let me just go back. This is the primary one from Washington, and the remaining 3 are from Morris Street. This view here basically is showing the existing townhouse with basically the addition, new building in the rear. This is the existing drawings of the current building that's there. which shows a really long one-story addition. Sorry that this is moving around. Basically, there's a rear yard one-story addition with a crawl space for the existing kitchen, and the townhouse has the 2 residential units above and ground floor restaurant. So go back to we are proposing, completely renovating the interior of the existing building, since it would be a different layout, removing the old rear yard addition completely, and reconstructing the sidewalls of the existing townhouse, but preserving the front half of the existing townhouse to maintain its structural stability. This is the proposed cellar of the building. It would include the commercial space in the cellar, both in the corner of Washington and Morris Street, and in the existing building. It would also be part of the commercial space. We have our 2 means of egress for then all of the trash and common utilities for the residential and commercial part of the building. We're including an elevator which connects the residential units for all the floors, and then we have a service elevator which would connect just the ground floor to the cellar for commercial use, mostly for trash removal and deliveries. This is the first floor, the ground floor space. Starting over here on 83, I call it 83 Morris, which would be the empty lot, would be the residential entry into the residential part of the building. We have the existing commercial restaurant space for the townhouse on 85 Morris. And then going towards the corner, 87, 89, and on Washington would be one larger commercial space or restaurant use. For this purposes, we're showing 2 areas for residential kitchens in the back. And as you can see here, we have basically our service elevator for the commercial portion, and our means of egress out on the side towards Washington, and also through the residential part, through the lobby. The building extends essentially towards the rear, again, the side yard line, with a small overhang and deck on the back. This is the second floor. Sorry, let's go back. This is the second floor. Basically, we have 4 units in the new building, and again, 1 unit in the existing building. The residence for the existing building would be entered in on the second floor. So he'll still have its 2 means of egress through a common hallway, and essentially it's a duplex. We have a 2-bedroom unit on the empty lot, which extends from Morris Street to the rear yard. And we have 1 small 1-bedroom unit in the rear, and the 2 other corner unit. The 1 corner unit is also a 2-bedroom, and another 2-bedroom apartment on the Washington Street side. All the units have basically frontage on the street, with the exception of just the 1-bedroom unit in the back. And the unit in the back has a small balcony to introduce some outdoor space. All the floors, the apartment layouts are the same, except for the duplex in the existing building. The building does change the top floor. We changed the massing on the top floor for the corner unit. We stepped back adjacent to the existing 85 Morris Street. So basically, since the floors don't align for the existing building versus the new, there's a setback at the top floor to create a small terrace. There's a small addition over the existing building as basically a penthouse bulkhead stair, with then a terrace on the roof of the existing, which is also set back. And on the roof, we have basically a small centralized roof deck with the 2 means of egress and elevator. The perimeter is surrounded by green roof and mechanical utilities. There are no interior spaces on the roof other than the means of egress staircase and the elevator. This is the elevation on Morris Street showing the new building sandwiching the existing building. I include the materials for the facade. The primary facade is two types of brick. We have two tones. The field is, yeah. The field brick, essentially, yeah, that brick, sorry, is a fluted special shape brick. Which would be along the perimeters. And the infill panels below the windows would be a combination of two bricks, which would be a special shaped brick and a same color brick, which would be a solid brick in a standard brick profile. I'll go through the overall elevations, showing you the details of it. So essentially the facade is consisting of two tones of brick.
There you go. Solid brick.
We're using a Marvin type window for the front facade, using various divisions and overall pattern of it. This ground floor storefronts are also like a Marvin system and broken down to mimic a typical storefront of base panels, transoms, and picture windows, including doors as well. The existing building will be restoring its facade, replacing the windows with wood Marvin Ultimate double hungs. The existing storefront and entry will be restored. The cornices will be painted. The lintels will also be essentially restored to its original color, and the cornice would also be painted and restored. There's no real modifications to the existing facade. And on this facade, we're showing basically how the building changes as it goes across from starting at 83 Morris on the far left side, essentially is the empty lot, which would be basically the 4-story building and the residential entry. And then it steps down to the original townhouse. And then to the right, the cornice is down lower with then a recessed setback terrace for the metal panel facade. And on the corner, it goes back to its full height and turns the corner as well. We also play along with the basic, the different patterns of the windows and the bays to essentially not make it this monotonous building of everything being consistent, where we do organize it based on the different levels and the different groupings of where the bays of these buildings. This is the Washington Street elevation, which continues the corner. Again, we break down the individual bays, where we have the corner is basically a mirror of each other, and then it breaks down to a different bay for the middle, and then on the end, to break it, to continue it to the adjacent existing townhouses, we lowered the cornice and created a metal panel system above it to reduce its appearance and bulk. These are the sections. This is the section through Washington Street, showing the outline of the existing townhouse to the left. And this is the rear yard, where basically it's a simple facade with large windows and doors, and the terraces with the railings and balconies. And then on the right-hand side, is let's call it the lot, the long empty lot, where we have the through units, where we have the 3 floors of residential above the ground floor. The materiality on the back is a smooth hardy board panel for the middle section in the courtyard, and then on the rear yard facade of the on the empty lot would be a brick. Similar, we're going to be using the red brick for the back. Yes, sorry. These are proposed color schemes for the existing building. Yeah, sorry, I'll go back to that on the renderings. This is the section of the building through the existing building, showing the existing cornice line and the sight lines from the building, through the building. That the roof decks are not visible from that sight line, including the existing roof terrace on the existing building, and then the new roof deck on the new building. And here you can see that we respected the interior floor lines of the existing building, and then the new building has a different floor-to-floor height. Again, there's another section showing through the existing building and the new building seen beyond. We are returning the brick on the side facade and then introducing a metal panel on the interior part once it's about 10 feet away from the street. This is a section, again, going back to that section repeated. This is a section through Morris Street, showing that the roof deck is not visible from the full 4-story height. This is a section again through Morris Street in the residential entry of it, where there's no roof deck is visible there. And this is a section showing the setback at 87 Morris Street, which would be on the 4th floor outdoor terrace on the front of Morris Street. These are basically the wall section details of the facade. Basically, I can go through that, but basically we're showing alternating pattern using the different types of brick, modulating the facade where the facade has the punched openings of the large windows that are recessed back, the three-dimensionality of the brick and the play of the alternating brick pattern in the individual bays. These are section details of the cornice, sorry, not the cornice. Here I have the canopy for the corner unit and for the residence, and including some signage that we'll be using, mostly blade signs, and then the signage on the canopies. And this signage on the canopies, yes. This section here is a section through the existing building, showing the restoration of the storefront and how we're melding the two different constructions together with the new construction and basically reconstructing the interior of the building. This is a corner view from Morris Street, Morris and Washington, showing the building. The cornice is made up of a zinc metal panel. It's broken down also into bays, where the cornice is not just this continuous cornice, it's a sort of modernized cornice, articulating it slightly different. This is the view from Morris Street, looking towards Washington. And this shows you that the two different types of bricks. On the ends, the corners, and the columns, we have the fluted brick, and in the bays below the windows is an alternating. We have the three-dimensional brick that we're going to be doing in the soldier course, alternating it with then a solid brick band going across. The window heads and sills are going to be this precast material in a sort of a buff color, like a limestone color. And that's also then continuous and banding throughout the entire building. This is the view of from Washington Street. showing the breakdown of the shift of the cornice and the change in material of the metal panel for the 4th floor. The metal panels will be more three-dimensional. We have a detail for the grooves are going to be more of a batten, sort of an articulation of the panels. It's not just a flat panel with a reveal. This is like an elevation rendering of Morris Street and an elevation rendering of Washington Street. And here's some of the details showing the metal panel and the three-dimensional articulation of the bay, of the brick masonry bay, and a detail of the cornice as well. And these are just some miscellaneous details showing the railings for the roof deck, the front yard, the glass railing at the front terrace on Morris Street, and just some typical window details. And this is a section cutting through the existing building where it marries and meets the new building, and how we're treating it structurally, keeping them independent. And that concludes my summary of the building, and I can answer any questions that you have.
Anyone have any questions? Want to go back? It's a large building and a lengthy presentation, so if anyone wants to go back and look at something.
Before we really get into it, it's not a question, it's more a comment. You're going to have to start calling me Robert Parking Gordon, because I know this is not, the appropriate form for this, and I know this is going to zoning, but I still feel an obligation to put on the record that we keep losing parking in the historic districts, and we don't seem to get any parking. And it's not really a historic issue, except to the extent that soon parking in the historic districts going to be a thing of the past, and I have real concerns about that. So just putting it out there.
I can answer that or comment
Yeah,
on that.
please.
No, because we did an investigation on is parking feasible here, and in my professional opinion, I did studies on it. Parking is not feasible on this site, just because of you have a historic structure that we're trying not to demolish. To have an access ramp going down to let's call it cellar parking is feasibly impossible. The previous application had a lift. For the scale of this project, it's not financially feasible for it. Grade parking is discouraged. So that limited our opportunity of parking. We didn't want to have an empty lot. That's currently how they're treating parking right now. So those were the considerations that we did. Considering that this is an urban environment, it's also real close to public transportation. It's a walking city. We are actually giving up a driveway cut, 2 driveway cuts. So we kind of feel that we're contributing to street parking, which is more in the nature of this neighborhood. So that would be my comment to that.
Noted. Thank you.
Okay, so does anyone want to go back and look at a detail, spend some more time on the elevations? Anyone have any questions?
Did you take any inspiration from the Sugar House? This is definitely giving me deja vu when I think of 174 Washington Street. It has a similar look to the windows.
To Sugar House, not specifically. I've done work in that building, but I haven't. It's not my inspiration at all. I don't know if you've seen some of my previous work at 16 Bright Street. That's probably closer inspiration. Is just sort of the working in in the different neighborhoods in the historic district. Feel really sensitive towards brickwork. I know how important that is. That this is not just a flat facade or a glass structure. That's my inspiration. So.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Should we move to public comment? Okay. Are there any members of the public present who would like to speak? All right. Do you want to make a motion to open public comment?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I
All right. Again, just for the record, all questions will be directed through the chair and answered at the end of public comment. So Diane will go ahead and swear you in.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Or just state your name for the record.
Name's Diane Case, D-I-A-N-E. Last name is K-A-E-S-E. And I'm here speaking for the Historic Paulus Hook Association, who has reviewed this application. And I also wear kind of two hats because my house is adjacent to this property site. So I'm well aware of the details of this project. First of all, I'd like to say thank you. We have worked with the developer on this quite a bit over the last year or so. We worked extensively with the prior developer and basically have no qualms about the size of the project. It's been brought down in units, but unfortunately what we lost in units, we gained in no parking. So we now have 13 units with no parking, which none of us are thrilled at, but we're very happy to see this corner finally addressed after many, many years. There are a couple of things that I just want to note for the record. One is that the garbage all comes out on the south side. It's on the small sidewalk. It needs to be very carefully monitored. It needs to be very carefully dealt with there, because otherwise it's going to end up on the residential properties to the south. You have two spaces that are outdoor spaces, one of which is essentially a active yard. The other one appears to be off the commercial kitchen area and off the commercial restaurant area, and it also has access from the community space of the building. So the question is that going to be outdoor seating? The neighborhood certainly would prefer that is not outdoor seating for the restaurant. And I know that's not yours, but it's a problem for us as we have dealt with the last restaurant there who used the deep lot as one of their places to throw their garbage on a regular basis. So, and the noise associated with it. So, the handrails on the front street facade need a cap. They seem to be rather thin. Fences in the rear yard, we will work with the developer on that because the 6-foot fence there that is proposed, that is a solid fence along with the new building, the Tishman buildings that are going up are dramatically closing in our block, which is one of the few that still have the original donut. So we would like to get those to be more, have more ventilation, have something through there that gives us a little bit more light and air. The details of the brick, we've gone back and forth on a regular basis. Nobody's thrilled with the darkness of it, and we would love to see if we can deal with that and with the colors a little bit more in the future, which, well, and then there's two other things. Taking the rear off the historic building, it's not clear to me from the drawings, and I haven't seen any structural drawings as to if they are actually rebuilding that entire section of the building and how are they connecting the original building and stabilizing the original building, what is left of it, to the new building. So I think that's, if we're going to do facadism, I think we need to have that spelled out very carefully. And that's essentially what I think we're doing there, but I'm not quite sure. Lastly, what this does is that the state of the drawings and the state of the development of this project don't provide a whole lot of detail to us. It's good, interesting concepts, but this is going to rely very heavily upon staff to make this successful. And I have a concern with that, not because we have problems with staff in any way, shape, or form, but they have a lot of work to do. And do they need to be dealing with this at this level? Can we possibly take this to a point where it is more developed and we're a little bit further along. And that's my question for you as a board. But like I said, the overall massing of it, the overall concept of it, the neighborhood does not have an objection to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public in attendance who would like to speak? All right, staff sees none and recommends a motion to close public comment.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, move into staff comments, unless, Stephen, there's anything you want to, actually, no, well, does anyone have any questions, concerns about any of the issues that Diane raised?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
So the only thing I'm reacting to with this scheme is, there's a lot of busyness. My initial reaction was there's a lot of busyness with the windows. And then, there's a lot of texture on the building also. And I don't necessarily dislike it at all. I'm just wondering, the historic building that's there has a quietness to it, like very quiet. And I'm concerned that these buildings are not in conversation with each other quite enough. And I'm wondering if there's a simple move, like the black windows and the black cornice, could that be toned down to a warmer, like a brown color, to bring things a little bit down a notch? And then, maybe even the cornice on the historic building could be brought up a notch in tone so that they kind of share more language visually.
You want me to answer now?
That's just
Or are there
that's
other
just how I'm
comments?
reacting.
Your testimony's still open, so you're
that's just
good.
how I'm reacting to the design, because I think it's well thought out and it's very interesting and there's a lot going on, but I'm sort of torn between the new building having a lot going on and the old building.
Yeah, I can
very,
answer
very
that
subdued.
part. Oh, sorry.
And just that the old building is very, very subdued.
Yes, the existing building is, is on the minimal side. It's subdued. My feeling was to replicate it or to continue that same punched window opening over the size of this building on this corner would be monotonous. It would just be like as if I was recreating a series of townhouses just put together. So I was trying to deviate that by making them larger and more interesting, but not making it a glass building. A lot of the newer buildings, that's the trend, floor to ceiling windows. That wasn't the intent here. Going with a larger, more, taking it to the next step, a little bit more modern, breaking down the window, creating larger windows, but breaking down the modules and creating that pattern. I think that's what brings interest to it. And the same thing with the texture of the building. Yes, it has a lot of texture, but it's consistent. It's rational. It follows the same, historic pattern that exists in these buildings. A lot of the buildings in the area do use different types of brick to create brick patterns in bays. So I'm playing with that as well, but still trying to keep it modern. I'm not trying to recreate an old building in this neighborhood. A lot of the ones that are done that way, in my opinion, are failures. A lot of them just look, the detail's not there. So here I am trying to introduce a different type of cornice. Something that's a little sharper, but still has the same scale and presence that exists on the block. The tone of the cornice is not just black. It's going to be like a charcoal blue gray. The renderings are, these renderings are really hard to achieve a realism to it. So unfortunately, we have to go back to what the material is, just to make that connection, that leap. The existing cornice on the building will be painted, and we're going to go with a dark, a dark brown, which is traditional for this neighborhood. I do think that by blending in the red tone, brown red tone of the wood windows and the storefront is going to work with sort of the purple brown brick that's fluted. That's the primary. And then going with a more traditional red, but using a different shape to make it unique. And in my opinion, that's what I think really brings this building to a different level that we really don't see that often in this neighborhood. So that would be my comment.
No, I do enjoy the design and the textures. I just, at least in these renderings, just a little bit concerned about the dark windows and the dark cornice relative to the historic building.
I understand that based on the renderings. Renderings are, I don't know if you sat through them. It's really hard to get it exactly the way you to do it, just based on the time of day that the renderer picks. There's all these issues that we're dealing with when it comes to doing. We're not there with photorealism, at least not me yet, to get it that way. And was there another comment? Okay.
I was going to say that the existing building is not portrayed well in the rendering. It comes off as sort of bisque.
Yes, yeah.
It's really a red brick building.
It is, and I did that intentionally just so that there's, because when you're trying to now match red to red, I think it was just going to start forcing it to look the same. We all know it's going to look different. It has a different mortar joint. It's even like old red brick does not look like new red brick. Even new red brick, if it's the same brick, isn't going to look the same. So I wanted to keep that separate, and that's why I used the fluted brick adjacent to it, so it automatically breaks it down. And really, your perception is just going to be more about tone and color and texture.
I think it looks great.
Thank you.
It doesn't try to, as you said, mimic historic structures, yet it has a certain, to me, almost an industrial feel, which is, tied to Paula's Hook. I mean, there were so many warehouses there back in the day, and I think you did a great job.
Okay.
So I think I would just, repeat Ms. Case's questions.
Yeah, can you repeat
to give
that?
the applicant. Yeah, sure. Well, if I can read my own handwriting. So the first comment related to the garbage on the south side, a desire to ensure that garbage doesn't end up on the properties to the south. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, most of the commercial garbage in this district is handled privately now, or at least the owner. That's how it would be written into the lease. It's not just leaving it out on commercial trash day. It's handled on it privately. Garbage will be stored in the cellar. That's why we provided a service lift, service elevator to transfer the garbage out. And we also created a buffer zone between the building and the sidewalk with the fenced area, so it looks more residential. And so that's how I address that comment.
Will there be outdoor seating for the restaurant?
That at this point, we don't have an application for the actual restaurant space. I know there's a distinction between restaurant versus cafe. Cafe does not permit rear yard seating. Restaurant does. That would be under a separate application if rear yard seating is proposed.
And I'll just interject here. I don't know if this is on
No,
or
you
not.
have to tap it on.
It's green. How about now?
No.
Super duper. Okay, sorry for interrupting everyone. I just want to focus that the board's commission's review is not on seating permits or things like that or garbage. And I think it's difficult when we're looking at what these buildings are and like people are going to be here and living here and doing things. But the commission is focused on the considerations in the ordinance. So if we could just keep on that.
The next question.
Hold on. Yeah, it's like a normal button on that one, but there. Yeah, take your pick.
I do
Mike's.
think it is relevant to know because it is in one of the conditions of approval in staff comments, is that these commercial spaces are so rarely have tenants and fit outs and everything like that ready to go at this stage, right? So things like signage and layouts and even sometimes the number of commercial spaces can change, and that would require tenants coming back to this commission potentially and to the zoning board potentially once there's a specific fit out for each of the spaces.
Sure. There was a comment that the handrails need a cap and they're rather thin.
Yeah, I have details showing that, and then we do a a flat top articulated top rail on the front yard fencing. I could show you those drawings. And that would be here. That would be the top right-hand corner here. This is the standard or the typical railing for the front yard. And this would be the railing detail as well, which would be a painted iron fence, non-aluminum.
All right, and then there was a comment that the
Let me interject. I think the reason why that might have come up was because I'm looking at the rendering.
It probably the rendering.
The rendering appears to have sort of a
picket.
picket.
Oops, sorry. Sorry.
Yes, the rendering appears to have a sharp picket. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a rendering change or something that was overlooked in the rendering. But the detail, the drawings specifically call out this detail. This is the intention. The existing railing on the existing building is a picket. Oh, sorry, with a vertical.
And a flat top.
extension. Yeah, and no flat top.
Okay. Oh, on the existing
Yeah, on
building.
the existing,
Okay, I see.
Now that we've got that clarified, comment about the 6-foot fence closing in the block. We want to maintain the donut and ensure that there's ventilation for light and air.
Yeah, the owner agreed that they would have a discussion on what the fence should actually be. I'm showing a 6-foot-high cedar fence, whether it's a solid board tongue and groove or whether it's a shadow box. That would be for the owner to discuss with the neighbor.
Yeah, the ownership doesn't particularly matter to ownership. So happy to work with staff and Diane on whatever's suitable for the fence.
That sounds good. Thank you. There was a comment about the brick being a little too dark. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I wanted a distinction in brick tone. I wanted a distinction in brick tone from a more traditional red brick. Again, to create that difference of the existing building using a darker tone. We struggled finding bricks that we liked. We were avoiding a lot of bricks that were sort of just not quite there. There's different color reds. There's a whole spectrum of reds. Once you start looking at a dark red, it doesn't look right. It looks too purple. We were looking at browns, and for me, the browns look too close to the red. So for me, this distinction of going slightly darker but not going, black or charcoal gray was a nice distinction. Plus, also, this brick has a sheen to it. It's not just about the color, it's about the sheen. It's about the flute. It's going to be about the shadow line that exists on the brick. So that would be my opinion.
Okay, the next comment or question was a question I also had, which was about how you're taking the rear off the historic building. How are you doing that? How are you attaching the new structure to the existing?
Yes. So this was taken into consideration highly when I was doing the initial design. This design took into consideration structure. I reviewed this with structural engineers and we discussed this, and also knowing the reality of construction. I had an experience in New York City where we're doing a reconstruction of a 3-story wood frame historic facade where the entire building had already collapsed other than the facade, and it was about to be pulled down. We were able to basically remove the entire interior and reconstruct it in modern materials and preserve the facade and reconstruct the facade. Since it was wood frame, it was a little easier to handle. But in this case, since it is a brick structure, what we're proposing is reconstructing the sidewalls. What we're going to do, though, is preserve the front 10 feet of the existing brick, because we're not going to excavate on the first 10 feet for the structure. The cellar, let me just go back to the cellar plan, sorry. We're stepping back, when we're constructing the cellar, we're basically stepping back I think it was about 8 feet on the side, because this existing cellar goes down around 7 feet. So we are on a 45-degree angle. We're not excavating near the front of the building to preserve as much of the original structure as possible. Then the sidewalls, once it's beyond that, we are going to reconstruct it with new foundations and new masonry walls. And then the entire building on the inside would then be reconstructed as well. None of this is visible with the new building. But essentially we are keeping that line. So essentially it's still an independent structure, but with a new structure on the inside. Yeah, if we do have to excavate the area because of the soil condition. These were originally other apartment buildings or townhouses, and when they were demolished, they basically left the rubble in place. It's just fill, dirty fill. The front part of the building, even in the cellar, we're not excavating the foundations at the front. We're going to bench it. We're going to step it down. So we're keeping the original cellar at this point, and then we're increasing this, we're lowering the cellar floor to match the new building towards the back. Does that explain it? Or do you need me to elaborate a little bit more?
Do you have the details of how the new structure will be joined to the remaining original structure?
Yes. Okay. So this is the existing facade on this wall section here. We're doing new wood frame on the interior floors.
Are you able to zoom in a little? It's
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
hard to read.
Yeah. Right. We're doing TJI construction on the interior. TJI, wood frame floor structure and roof structure on the interior, 2 floors. The second floor is going to be some sort of concrete structure, separating the commercial space from the residential. Then on this is a section basically through the existing building where we're preserving the masonry wall, and then the new building. So the new building would be an independent structure on its side. We're not going to be essentially connecting them together, except for the back part, which is going to be new.
Okay, I think, unless anybody else has questions, I think we're ready for staff comment.
And judging by the looks in my direction, no one else has any questions. All right. We have the staff report. I do just have 2, classic scenario typos that I gotta address on the record. The first is that the case number on the staff report is wrong. It should be H24, not H-22. The second is that in the project proposal and background, it is not owned by 445 Jersey Ave SPE LLC, although everyone can tell what staff report I used as my base document now. It should be this owner as reflected on the landowner verification form on the application and on the agenda. All right, moving on to staff recommendations and comments. So in general, we are supportive of this application. This commission has seen and staff has seen many a proposal for this site. And we are always in favor of putting something here. This happens to be a very good version of something. We think it's a well thought out design. We think it does a good job of connecting the historic building with something new. And we do think it's contextual for the block. They are asking for a series of variances. We don't think any of them are particularly crazy. Crazy. There's, of course, the use variance for the multifamily, which we see a lot of because we don't permit it. There's a couple of smaller variances that are relatively low key and I think are satisfied, or not satisfied per se, but are necessary in order to have a project that is contextual. We do think that there are, of course, some details that need to be worked out. They have been raised this evening. Almost every single one has been raised this evening. So I think we have a pretty good list of them that will need to be either slightly modified or expanded upon at the time of construction documents. But yeah, overall, we think it's consistent with our design standards. We think that it's a good project, and we do think that the HPC should recommend the project to the zoning board and approve a COA. We do have conditions that are being proposed. Some of them are standard in nature. Some of them are, I'm going to go through them. The first is that all lighting on the standard roof deck lighting to keep everything downcast. The second one is a standard roof deck one, that no portion of the roof deck or the terrace fronting Morris Street, as I forget if it was Stephen or Nelson explained, that is technically a side yard, which is why that terrace doesn't, they are abiding by the 10-foot setback at our request. They don't technically have to meet it because it's not the primary facade of the building, it's a side terrace. But anyway, nothing should be visible from that roof deck, trees, umbrellas, anything like that. The exterior lighting on the facade of the building, this is not something we typically see, but there is a lighting ordinance in the city that says all of the exterior lighting needs to be less, either 1 foot candle or less than 1 foot candle at the property line. That is less important for a rear yard, more important for a front yard. Just keep everything downcast, and that's not an issue. We have the intercom condition, which is just that we're putting things into the brick mortar. I recognize that this is a new building, and that is something that you typically see on historic buildings. However, if we put everything into the brick mortar, when they eventually have to change the technology, we're not going to have holes in the brick. So there are commercial tenants that are going to go into this building. There is signage proposed for this building. We are fine with the signage as proposed. We think it is perfectly appropriate for the building, right? So there's 2 types of signage proposed for this building. We have some blade signs coming off of the building. Blade signs coming off of the building. I will slow down. I can see it in your eyes that you're, well, yes, I'm sorry. And then there coming off of the building. And then there are some pin letters proposed for the awnings, neither of which have lighting. We are fine with all of that. If a tenant comes in and chooses to utilize either the blade sign in the same hanging arm and size, or put their tenant name in pin letters with no lighting, we're going to approve that at the staff level because it's on the site plan. However, this condition explains that if they want to install any other kind of exterior signage other than, hours of operation on a door or something that we would normally approve at a staff level, they will have to come back to the commission. We've seen instances of that at 130 Bay Street, where they've had some tenants there come back to the commission for more signage. That condition also includes, a reminder that this does not include any approval tonight would not include fit out for their interior, tenant fit out for the interior space. So any tenant that signs a lease here will have to come to the HPC to do a tenant fit out. Most of the time we approve that at the staff level. If there are changes to the exterior of the building, those will have to come back. Again, the commission has seen examples like this before, but not a standard condition. And then we also just have a condition regarding that rear garden space that Diane brought up. Again, that's something that we are specifically requesting that on the future tenant fit outs, they address that garden space, if they're going to have access to it, what kind of access to it. And that may or may not need to come back to the commission depending on what kind of access they're looking for. And then after that, after that, we have all of our standard conditions. And then we also have one more, that the applicant shall work with staff and the neighborhood to revise the rear yard fence.
Can I make one correction?
Yes, you may.
When you said that the signage did not have lighting.
Oh, the awning does.
Has lighting.
But it's
on the
very
drawing,
minimal.
And it's not visible. Right.
Yes.
So just to make that correction.
It's just a little bit of uplighting, correct? Okay. Which we are fine with. So fine that I forgot that it existed.
Just a question for you, Maggie. I personally don't take issue with the new building. What I do take issue with, and this is why I want to ask you, is what I would consider to be partial demolition of the existing historic building.
Yeah.
I don't take issue with the demolition of any additions to that historic building, but the original envelope that's a question for me. How do we reconcile that? Because that's not something that I think we've done except for in redevelopment plans, where we've allowed sort of, for a better word, facadism.
So it is a tough pill to swallow, right? I'm not suggesting that you have to swallow it. I'm just saying, like, it is definitely something that it's something we do. Nelson, can you bring up your plans, just the existing, maybe not the existing, maybe where we can see what is proposed on each floor?
Yes.
So, and something that I think is easy for you guys to address, would you be able to do the foundations for the new building without redoing the foundations for the existing historic building? Is that feasible?
That is not feasible.
And that is the reason why Nelson can attest to this. How many questions have I asked about this?
Many times. And with the soils report, and also the existing condition of the cellar is I wouldn't even call it a rubble wall. It's a porous wall that needs to be essentially reconstructed. Underpinning isn't even an option there because it's in such poor shape. The front part, because it's the street wall, that appears to be in probably the best shape. But the rest, including the back, because the back wall, I'll take you to the existing.
Yeah, so I would like you to go through the existing and
So
then...
on the existing, this is the line of the existing rear yard wall at the ground floor. That wall has basically been completely removed. And on the upper floor, it's preserved in place. The existing wall, there's probably steel there, but was done years and years ago, and we expect that condition to be poor. At the cellar level, just go back. Yeah, here you'll see. At the cellar level, they essentially excavated out the backyard to have access to some sort of crawl space where the kitchen was built. This whole wall here essentially is, I use the word porous. It's in poor condition. The mortar has basically completely been removed, or deteriorated. Yeah, it's virtually not there. Yeah. And we found this condition all the way towards the back. The issue that I see what's happened over time is, the two adjacent buildings next to it were removed. There have been years and years of just water infiltration in this area. So every attempt's being made, and structurally, by benching back the front 10 feet of the building, by not excavating, at least in sequence. Once the new building foundations are in place, then selective excavation for grade beams can be done to safely, build next to this historic building. So that's been taken into consideration highly. I preserve the outline of the building. So basically knowing that we're trying to maintain it as much as possible. But knowing, I'm being upfront and being realistic based on consultation with excellent structural engineer that's had many projects built here in Jersey City as well. And basically that's been our professional opinion, professional conclusion on this. We didn't take it lightly. We weren't looking to do a facadectomy and just complete, cut it off at the front. We all seen that building going, on the corner near Palisades. And they basically just chopped off the whole facade and left it standing and, shored it up and then put a glass building around it. That's not what we were trying to do here.
Yeah, I see that. I generally would say that, in my opinion, if we were to allow a partial demolition to any structure, though, in the historic district, we would need that engineer's report. So you said you're working with an engineer right now.
Yes.
I think we should be getting an engineer's report for that.
We have an engineer's report. You want me to submit that as exhibit for this? Or
I
would you
mean,
like to
we-
address this at a later, as part of the construction documents, as we really develop the drawings and, the structure part of it?
I mean, you can submit it as an exhibit to show the commission that it exists. I can't review it on the spot.
No, I'm not expecting, yeah.
Hold on.
So do we want to show, Nelson and I could both represent that there's an engineering report that exists. We could enter it if we want to, if we enter it.
But if
Let's
we don't
enter
know the
it.
content, what is that actually telling us? You have an engineer's report.
Yeah, that we're
Yeah.
essentially,
And the engineer's saying that this is not stable. We cannot stabilize this structure. Something to that effect?
the entire structure, yes,
Right.
the back half.
Okay.
We can mark it as
So
an
we can mark
exhibit.
that as an exhibit?
Yeah, I'm just I don't think
Sure. So
we have the capacity to review it on the spot right now. That's not a realistic expectation, I don't think.
Exhibit A1, engineering report dated January 29th, 2025, prepared by JAG Engineering.
This is Maggie, that will be A1 in evidence.
Thank you.
Nelson, can you also go through and show the line of reconstructed wall versus like just through the whole set?
Yes. Wait for this to come up on the screen. So this dark gray line here, that would be the existing building and the existing cellar slab. The gray lines here take it all the way back. This would be the reconstructed wall and reconstructed foundation. And then the back wall, since it doesn't really exist above, we're just creating columns to support the floor structure above. Sorry.
Yeah, why don't you go like floor by floor by floor?
And this is the ground floor commercial space. Again, the structure will be reconstructed on the side. And we would have basically beams at this point as well, going to the columns. On the upper floor, which would be the residential area, we're essentially saying we're reconstructing the outline of the original townhouse. This would be the third floor. Same thing, we're reconstructing the outline of the original townhouse. And this is the roof plan.
Can you tell us about the history of the building? I feel like, we kind of went through the application pretty quickly and we focused mostly on the new construction, but now that we're having this conversation about partially demolishing the historic structure, I'm a lot more concerned about learning about this building that we're about to tear apart.
Well, these are the drawings of the existing, just so you see the profile. The existing condition of the building on the upper floor is in terrible shape. It's essentially been an abandoned apartment that is probably 50% demolished. And there's an existing apartment on the second level, which is in it's in poor condition but livable condition. And then there's the current restaurant on the ground floor, and then the cellar. The actual history of the building, I don't know much about, other than it was probably built in the 1860s. It looked like basically a typical storefront with living above, and it was a relatively small, modest building. In general, the facade is in great shape. The original cornice, the wood cornice is in place. The tin cornice at the storefront is in place. The existing storefront looks like it was modified over the years, but again, it's it's a typical storefront in relatively good condition. So we don't see any issues with the front facade. The existing brickwork on the facade has been well maintained. The sidewalls, because it was originally, sandwiched between two other buildings, has not been, other than some stucco paint that's probably been put on it for that probably isn't even watertight. So that's what I would describe. Sorry, here's the.
Nelson.
Yes.
Would you say that any reuse of this building would require substantial reconstruction, renovation? You were mentioning.
Yes.
the
Yeah.
foundation.
Besides the foundation, the internal structure of the building, considering the small floor plate and the introduction of bathroom and kitchen in this, the joists are in poor shape. Just walking through and seeing the existing plaster that's sort of been removed and patchwork. So in my opinion, to do a new building around this old this original structure, it would have to be completely restructured on the interior. Obviously, with working with a structural engineer, we're going to take consideration if sistering joists in the front, first 10 feet is sufficient to support the new floor loads. We'll take that into consideration. But in my opinion, just going through the building, and even preserving what we propose as the layout requires, a reconstruction at least of the perimeter walls.
And so is that what you're proposing then, to reconstruct these portions, or are you going to be demolishing portions and dramatically changing the envelope of the building in places? I'm not clear.
Well, yeah, we're on the upper floors. So here, this is the cellar, so we're reconstructing the base, right? On the first floor, we're also reconstructing the sidewalls. We're creating new openings on this, since it's a new structure. On the upper floor, we are reconstructing the sidewalls and the rear walls.
So you're reconstructing it but introducing the new openings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess I would ask if staff has any precedent, like any other examples of.
So we do see applicants come in with having to reconstruct walls, right? This is a common thing, especially when these buildings have been around as long as most of the historic districts have been. In the context of a new building being built around it while reconstructing that's something we see less. But I mean, they are keeping it in the same footprint, right? They've gone through this. There's also existing plans earlier in the set that show this as the footprint. The first floor is really where we see the most dramatic effect of this, because you have the new openings on the sides, right? We can, in staff's opinion, I'm ignoring the opening on the back because there's a whole addition there right now that's a non-historic addition that's coming down. So that opening was always going to be there. It's the introduction of those new openings on the side that connect to the other spaces, right? So like I said, this is not necessarily an easy fix, right? The walls need to be stabilized regardless. If someone had come in with an application for this building where you have that 1-story addition in the rear, and they said, we want to add 2 more stories on top of this, right? Like, that's a pretty standard application that we say. Based on their testimony, you would still have to do reconstruction. It's just it's just a larger part of the rest of the project is so large that this seems like it's kind of a lot more than it is, I would say. What I would like to see are the structural drawings for it, and at the time of construction documents, a stabilization plan. We've had them submitted in the past where the applicant shows how they're going to stabilize that section that they're keeping. I think that's something that could easily be conditioned.
Well, I don't think we would need to reconstruct any portion of the building if we weren't building a new building around it. And then once we're reconstructing those walls, that kind of opens the door, so to speak, to creating new openings.
So I'm going to go ahead and take a leap forward, and I'm going to disagree with you there. So let's say we did not have an application for one person developing this lot and the next lot, right? Because that's what this is. Lots 1 and 5, they're next to each other. Say in an alternate universe, right? And this is purely hypothetical. Lots 1 and lots 5 were owned by different people, and someone wanted to develop lot 5. Based on their testimony, for that person to develop something completely separate from this building, you would still need to address the foundations on this building, because you would not be able to do anything over there on the next lot. Now, all of that is purely hypothetical, and basing it on their testimony with an engineering report that I got 10 minutes ago. Right? I'm just saying I don't think it's necessarily true to look at it in a vacuum where we're saying we would never have to reconstruct these walls if we weren't doing this project, because I don't think that's true based on their testimony.
Can I make one other point? Or
Yeah.
Okay. If we were trying to avoid reconstructing this, I think we would end up with a building that would not satisfy the commission, where we would end up with, whether it's a 3-foot or a 5-foot alley on the 2 sides of the building, to essentially not touch the sidewalls of this building. There would be basically, it would just be a terrible building with 2 alleys, completely separating this townhouse from the new building.
Listen, do you have the tax card photo on the set?
The tax photo?
The tax card photo. I know it was like a crappy one.
Yeah, it's.
I'm just looking for context on what was on either side.
I know this is neither here nor there, but out of curiosity, do you remember what was the most recent approved, just generally? Because I don't remember if there was any reconstruction or partial demolition last time.
In the previous application, the 2018 application
Yeah, that was
did
one of my
also.
first.
So that application had a host of issues that I don't need to dive into necessarily now, but they also had partial demolition proposed, not to this extent, but I do not believe, but they also had a very different scheme for the cellar that the applicant has already testified was not technically feasible. So I think it's a logical assumption to make that perhaps the applicant did not properly assess the feasibility of the foundations. And for what it's worth, they also could have deteriorated in the 6 years that they were untouched.
Could you put a condition in to work with the applicant to preserve as much of the original structure as possible based on what they find in the field?
Sure. I think that's reasonable. So something like the applicant shall work with HPC staff prior to the submission of construction documents to determine feasibility of preserving additional exterior walls of the existing building, or existing exterior wall wall area. Does
Works
that
for
work?
me, yes.
Okay.
There's no objection from the applicant.
Cool. Okay, so then we'd be adding that condition, and then we'd also be adding the condition for the stabilization plan to be submitted at the time of construction documents, which, for what it's worth, you would need to get permits anyway, but I do want it specifically written out. Are there any other questions for staff? Anything we want to go back to on the plans? They still have testimony open, so if there's something that we want to look at. Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion with conditions.
Second.
Okay. And just to be clear, that's a approval of COA with conditions and recommendation for approval to the zoning board?
Correct.
Okay. And that's Paul. And Janelle, you are the second? Okay. Stephen, does your client accept the conditions in the staff report and as read into the record?
Yes, all the conditions are acceptable.
Okay, great. We'll move to a roll call vote. Commissioner Sankamp?
Aye.
Commissioner Gunther?
Aye.
Commissioner Amatuzzo?
Aye.
Commissioner Cronin?
Aye.
Commissioner Griega is absent. Commissioner Sakong is absent. Commissioner Blazak is absent. Vice Chair Gucciardo is absent. Chairman Gordon?
Aye.
All right, there are 5 votes in favor, none against, with no abstentions. COA and recommendation to the Zoning Board of Adjustment is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Continuing on.
So we do not have any demos on the agenda tonight.
Table cases.
Oh, and we do not have any update on 172 Belmont, the tabled case. 172 Belmont, the tabled case. We do not have any updates on that.
Yeah, the demo case that's listed on the agenda requested to carry once again. We carried them, not necessarily, they asked to be carried to the next HPC meeting. We carried them to an unspecified meeting date. It increasingly appears that they do not have their act together and do not know their path forward. So I don't think it's a worthy use of staff time to touch base with them once a month. So when they are ready, they will come back to us. And if we reach July, you can also make a motion to dismiss. Make a motion to dismiss. All right. Or do you want me to handle this?
Go for it.
Okay. So it's right around that time of year, or every 2 years, we do have to make a committee for, that says March election of officers, that should say April. Election of officers, we will, as we do every 2 years, we have to elect a new chair, vice chair, and secretary. So we need a volunteer or two to bring us a name for who wants to be chair and vice chair. Unfortunately, Robert and Stephen are not permitted to repeat in their specific positions. They could flip-flop if they wanted to. They can be chair again in the future. I know this is your second stint as chair, Robert. But we do need a volunteer or two to just ask people. And that is the purpose of this, if anyone wants to volunteer.
Volunteer to ask people on the board
It's,
if they want to.
yes, it is. It's, guys, I know. It's in our bylaws. For what it's worth, this usually ends up happening. Whoever volunteers for this ends up asking people before the March meeting when you submit the name and everyone says cool. And then in April, we actually have the election. And that's when we remember to do this, for what it's worth. So these conversations usually happen right before the meeting.
So we should create members that aren't here tonight. Is that what you're saying then?
We can.
No, we should run them right now. Just push it through.
Yeah. Well, that can only happen in April.
All right. I'll blink first.
Okay. Anyone else want to help?
I will help.
Great. 2 members of the committee. That is a minimum. Anyone else want to?
I think we strive for the minimum.
Okay, great.
Because if you're asking people, it'd be rude to ask yourself. So
There you go. I love that mentality. All right. So then if we make a motion to appoint Chairman Gordon and Commissioner Cronin to the nomination committee.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. All right, and then the second item, I know this says resolution. I conferred with everyone in my office. We don't actually need a resolution to this. We just need a motion to make Michael acting secretary.
Motion.
Second.
Aye.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great.
Aye.
Yes. And then, come around that April election, I won't be here to be secretary, so.
You're stuck with me.
All right, that being said, we have no resolutions to memorialize, and we do not need an executive session. So that just leaves us with adjournment.
Motion.
Second.
All right, it is 9:17. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.